on Rosh Hashanah, 10 days of awe, they're going to sort of say, where have you been? Well, you know, got the kids, my parents, I got things that are going on. Faith. And says that if we the salvation and the faith that we over time and be faithful. You know, sometimes life, but we can never pull out. Over the years, I've had years that I've been a believer. During any of that time of pulling back from the community, a little bit and get caught up on things from my sense of responsibility. Even when I hung in there, I showed up. Some days it's just a go up. We'll find out. Who have committed themselves a spiritual life. A more controversial view. It's of faith. Don't have any works. He's going to work backwards, and he's that you've been changed your life, and so I'm going to use logic. Sure, you really means to be saved ultimately. That's a scary place to be. James is saying that if somebody claims to have faith in the Messiah, but her life doesn't show the results of faith, the faith might very well be phony. Because he goes on to say, and he says, can that faith save him? Questioning that if you don't have it here, maybe it doesn't grow from anything. The implied answer, of course, is a resounding no. This other kind of person is one that simply can't produce fruit because she or he does not have the root. And if you want to remember this message, 2 words. We're all about this morning roots and fruits. Roots and fruits are the hook that you can use to remember this. It may be that a person has a fake faith. It may be that he or she never understood salvation comes as a free gift through God from the Messiah by faith in the Messiah's death and resurrection. The reason they have no works is because they have no true faith. That hurts. That stings. The solution to that kind of spiritual death is to not try to make yourself better through more works, but to admit apart from Messiah that you can do nothing. Only when that root of faith is firmly planted can a life produce authentic fruit that is pleasing to God and apparent to others. 2 Corinthians 13:5 throws a challenge to us. Test yourselves to see if you are in the faith. Examine yourselves. Or do you not recognize this about yourselves, that Yeshua the Messiah is in you unless indeed you fail the test? If individuals are genuinely in the faith, the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, would be at work in them, promoting sanctification and moral living. But if their lives show no evidence of the Spirit's activity, then Yeshua is not indwelling in them, and they have failed the test. As we go towards the High Holy Days, as Murray said, we need to be thinking about these things. We need to be thinking about the fact that as we examine ourselves to see if we are in the faith, that wherever we're lacking, we need to turn away from that and turn towards the Lord. James 2:19 says, but someone will say that you have faith and I have actions. Show me this faith of yours without the actions, and I will show you my faith with the actions. And 1 John 3:17 backs it up and says this: if someone has worldly possessions and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how can he be loving God? And then in James 2:19, he begins to bear down. He says, you believe that God is one, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Good for you. The demons believe it too. And the thought makes him shudder with fear. And so he's making the point here that you can have a creed and not really have a faith. Before I came to faith, I would describe myself as religious. I went to congregation several times a year. And many times when I was I was in ministry, and I would go out into the community here in Los Angeles, and I would be sharing the faith. We would go out on campuses with little surveys, ask people questions and so on. And I'd sit down, start talking to a student, and I would many times I got this response: yes, but my faith is personal. It's something that I just keep to myself. And what's interesting about that is everything about faith in Yeshua is that it's personal, but it's demonstrated. It's out before the world. We have to talk about it, and we have to demonstrate it through our works. He gives us the example of Abraham, two very different people. Abraham, the father of our people, and Rahab, a Gentile prostitute. In verse 20, he says this: but foolish fellow, do you want to be shown that such faith apart from actions is barren? Wasn't Abraham declared righteous because of his actions when he offered up Yitzhak on the altar? You see that his faith worked with his actions. By the actions, the faith was made complete. Verse 23, and the passage of the Tanakh was fulfilled, which says, Abraham had faith in God, and it was credited to him and to his account as righteousness. He was even then called God's friend. You see that a person is declared righteous because of actions and not just because of faith alone. And then with Rahab, verse 25, likewise, wasn't Rahab the prostitute also declared righteous because of actions when she welcomed the messengers and sent them out by another route? Indeed, just as the body is without a spirit is dead, so too faith without actions is dead. And so both the author of Hebrews and James emphasize that these works were done by faith. Rahab heard all about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and she was fearful enough to commit herself to him and to his people. And she acted accordingly by putting out the scarlet thread on the wall. The key here, again, is roots and fruit. The answer involves two nuances to the word of the word to justify. The Greek verb for justification, depending on the context, the word can mean to declare righteousness. You're a good man, thank you so much. As a legal proceeding, or to demonstrate as righteousness. Paul and James use justify in two different ways. These two uses are different sides of the same coin. Paul is looking at the root of salvation. At the moment of salvation, you're saved through faith plus nothing. On the other side of the coin, James is looking at the fruit of salvation. After salvation, after the root is planted, there needs to be fruit. Isn't this what the Messiah said? There has to be fruit. Paul looks at life from God's perspective. James looks at life from the human perspective. Paul uses justified to mean to be declared righteous in the sight of God. James is addressing believers who have already experienced a gift of salvation and uses the word justified to mean demonstrate myself to be righteous in the sight of people. And so we have this apparent conflict, excuse me, that gets resolved in understanding the root and the fruit, what they're dealing with. From God's perspective, from a human perspective. And then in Ephesians 2, 4 through 10, Shaul really resolves this even more so. Here's what he said, and this is really important. But God is so rich in mercy and loves us with such intense love that even when we were dead because of our acts of disobedience, he brought us life along with the Messiah. It is by grace that you have been delivered. That is, God has raised us up with Messiah Yeshua and seated us with him in the heavens, in order to exhibit in the ages to come how infinitely rich is his grace. How great is his kindness towards us who are united with Messiah Yeshua. Here it is. For you have been delivered by grace through trusting, through faith. And this is not even your accomplishment, but God's gift. So Paul's pretty strong here. It's not because of anything you've done. So how do we reconcile this? Then he goes on to a very, very critical verse. Verse 10, for we are aware of God's making, created in union with the Messiah Yeshua, for a life of good actions already prepared by God for us to do. And there it is. We're saved by faith. But when we're saved by faith, God has in his mind, and this is remarkable to me. You know, I teach strategic planning for a school in Texas and California. And the idea of strategic planning is you analyze the environment, you come up with a strategy, then you implement it, you monitor it to be sure it's going. What we're being told here is that God has a strategy. We're being told here that when we come to faith, and even before the foundation of the earth, he had a plan for us and works for us that we need to fulfill. And James is saying, hey, I'm looking at it from this side, from the human side. I don't see any works. I don't see you fulfilling those things that were planned for you. And he's saying, maybe because I don't see any fruit, there's no root. There's no root. And he goes on, verse 18, but someone will say that you have faith and I have actions. Show me this faith of yours with the actions, and I will show you my faith by the actions. So let's talk a little bit about works. Now that we've resolved this conflict that salvation by faith and living by works as a fulfillment of our salvation are not incongruent, let's talk a little bit about works. What I always appreciated, when I went to school, Moody Bible Institute, we had a requirement. It was a 3-year program. And every semester, we had to go out into the community and do works as part of our program. Some of it was street evangelism. Some of it was nursing homes. Some of it was retirement homes. Some of it was rescue missions. Some of it was just working with youth groups and congregations. And the interesting thing about works is that works can be hard work. Ask Karen, who handles our Skid Row ministry, when she has to load up her truck, right? That big truck that she has and bring everything down. When I was at Moody, what we would do is some of the folks would go out into the street corners. And there was one particular street called Rush Street. And Rush Street was where the strip clubs were, the bars were, the restaurants were, the nightclubs, everything was there. And we would set up on street corners, and we'd have a tripod with a big pad, 2-by-3 foot pad, and we would be sharing the gospel with people on the street and drawing the gospel illustrations and so on, sharing the Messiah with everybody in that community. You have to understand, on the east side was the Gold Coast, the big money. On the west side of us was Cabrini Green, which was at the time the largest subsidized housing unit in the United States. It's not there anymore. So we had this mix of people that we were sharing the gospel with, and people would come by, and some would stop, business people, and listen, and others would stop and mock. And then we had the gangbangers that would come out and work the crowd. One time, we had a small bus that used to go through Cabrini Green, and as our students were ministering at Cabrini Green, they got in the middle of a gunfight between gang members, and they had to stop the bus, and everybody got down on the floor. Works can be hard work. But it doesn't have to always be that dramatic. I got assigned for the entire 3 years to Jewish nursing home and retirement homes. What could go wrong? What could go wrong? We would take a squad, one person like me, 10 minutes of preaching. Another group, we would have singers, then somebody played piano. 10 minutes speaking, sing the song, greet the people, and be on their way. So I was leaving one day, and this woman called me over and said, "Young man, please come here. I want to speak with you." And she said, "Young man, I just want to tell you, you are an eloquent speaker. For somebody as young as you, I'm very impressed. As a matter of fact, you remind me of the late Bishop Fulton Sheen, who was an eloquent, famous preacher in the 50s and 60s. I looked it up, and he was a famous preacher in the 50s and 60s. Oh, man, I rode the L back. There was no room for my head. I couldn't get through the door. So I got back to school. This was on Sunday, and then we're in regular classes. And I was in Hebrew class, and my friend Rob, we were talking about what'd you do over the weekend, and I said, well, I was at Edgewater Nursing Home. And I said, I had a really great experience there. And he said, yeah, I was there last semester. And I had a really positive experience, he said. After I got done preaching, this lady called me over. And she said, young man, I'd like to speak with you for a moment. And he said, yes, ma'am. I just want to tell you, you're the most eloquent speaker for a man your age. In fact, you remind me of the late Bishop Fulton Sheen. And I went, oy, 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 oy. Deflated the balloon, right? Humbling. Because the fact of the matter is, I got up there and stammered and stuttered, and it was a rough 10 minutes. But it didn't matter. I'll tell you why. Because a third of the people couldn't see me, a third of the people couldn't hear me, and a third of the people were asleep. It was the best training ground. Because when you're starting out and extending yourself, you trip up. That's the nature of the beast. But here's the thing, by faith, you get out there and you come back the next day and you do it again. I hope that they have burned all those early videos of me doing Hebrew, okay, up here, okay, many, many years ago. But in terms of, and I'll wrap it up with this, but in terms of our works and so on, what about the gifts of the Spirit? Are you operating in the gifts of the Spirit that God has called you to use? Preaching, teaching helps. There's so many different things that we need to do. I know people that came to faith for 20 years, never engaged with a community of believers. They said a prayer, and they watch YouTube, and they watch services on YouTube, and they feel good about it. The scriptures tell us that there's a day coming where we have to give an account to Yeshua for the things that we've done. And so we're going to step up, and he's going to say, okay, I laid out all these things from the foundation of the world for you to walk in, for you to do, for you to find. What have you done? And he's going to look at all those things. And then he's going to go back to the next person. He's going to go back to the next person. I know, I see you. Okay? He's going to go back to the next person, and he's going to ask them the same thing, and they're going to reply. And there are some people, don't get mad at me back there, there are some people who are going to step up, and he's going to ask them what they've done, and they're going to go like this. Yeah. Nah, it's all right. And they're going to go like this. They haven't done anything. And there's a passage of scripture that says, many will call me Lord, Lord, and I will say, I never knew you. I never knew. So as we go towards the high holy days, as we go towards the 10 days of awe, let us consider the words of James, that there's no final conflict between Paul saying we're saved by faith, the root, and the fruit experience with the living Yeshua, the Messiah, and that he is alive in our life, and that we are working out those good works that he has laid for us in the foundation of the world. That we would examine our lives to see, number one, if we're in the faith, and number two, we would apply the test. Are we doing our good works that you have called us to do? Thank you that you love us, that with a genuine heart, with a sincere heart, that we might return to you in fullness and faith and fruitfulness. In Yeshua's name, amen.
All right, I was encouraged to try again. So, yeah, I just want to clarify, I wasn't not prepared because of me. I was unprepared because of external reasons. That God, I'm going to try again. Here we go. Ready? Aleinu mishaber le'adon hakol, la'teket duva le'yatzer b'reshit haratzon, v'lo samanu kemishpocha hadama, shelo sam chelkeinu kayem, v'gor korim, u'meinu mod Melech Melchei HaMagim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shehu Notei Shamayim Haaretz Hu Moshe V'Karo B'Shamayim Imal Hu Digna Uzo Ushio Ve'ave Merohim Hu Eloheinu Emet Malkeinu Efesulato Kakatu Batorato Ve'adata Hayom Ve'adata Elevecha Ki Adonai Elohim B'Shamayim Imal Haaretz Ve'al Mi and gave him the name that is above every name, the name belonging to Yeshua. Every knee shall bend in the heavens and on earth and under the earth, and confess that Yeshua is the glory of God the Father. And it is said, Adonai will be king of the world, and on that day Adonai will be one, and his name will be one. The name of Adonai, the Melech Ol Koaretz, Bayom Hahu, Bayom Hahu, Echad, Ushemo, Echad.
You may be seated for a minute here. Time. I just want to hold up yard sites of Cindy Mann, Ronald, and Pamela Scott's mother, Randall Farnham, and also there were 4 more IDF soldiers who were in Rafah, and 2 Israeli men who were killed at a border crossing in Jordan. As we hold up these people, this is an important time as we get to the high holidays, and the king has come in from the field, and he's looking around and checking us out and seeing, are we ready for him? Are we ready to stand before Dayan Haemet, judge of truth? And people who have gone, they've gone before us, and they're there. They're standing there, and in many ways they're declaring God's presence and his power and his eternal love. Those of you who are in a time of mourning, a time of sight, would you stand up, and we will together